For an in-depth look at the UN General Assembly speeches, I'm joined now by Kamran Bokhari. He is a Middle East and South Asian affairs analyst at Stratfor, a geopolitical intelligence firm in Toronto. He is also the co-author of Political Islam in the Age of Democratization. Thanks so much for joining us. Frame these two fiery speeches, if you will. Abbas spoke late last week, Netanyahu today. Who scored the most points in this war of words, and what stands out in your mind?
I think the Israeli prime minister probably stands out better than the Palestinian president because, I mean, he made some powerful connections, although one may disagree with them. He used the threat of ISIS that's on the mind of everyone these days around the world, especially the United States and its allies. And he basically said, well, if you're worried about ISIS, then you must be worried about Iran at the same time. You cannot overlook the threat of Iran. He also made the comparison to Hamas, saying that Hamas is ISIS and ISIS is Hamas. This is something he said in the past as well. So I think that his speech probably resonated far better than that of President Mahmoud Abbas, who was obviously pushing his own narrative. But given the fact that we're dealing with an ISIS context, I think that the Prime Minister's speech probably, is going to be listened to much more than his Palestinian counterpart.
You say he resonated better. Were these two gentlemen trying to score points domestically, or were they really trying to persuade the world community, do you think?
I don't think that there is any domestic audience in either one of the speeches. I think that it's primarily, and in fact almost all, geared towards the international audience, trying to get support for their respective causes. The Palestinian president wants to be able to get to statehood, and he needs that international support, so his speech was geared towards that. Conversely, Prime Minister Netanyahu was running against a global perception that the Israeli Defense Forces, committed excesses in its recent war in Gaza. So he had to prove that no, from the Israeli point of view, that it wasn't excesses against the Palestinian people, and in fact that the Israelis did try to make sure, to the extent that it was possible, that they would not harm civilians. But obviously, in war, civilians do get killed. So there was that agenda in both speeches.
Clearly, Netanyahu is rather clever, though, when it comes to the domestic audience of New York. One of his quotes, to say that Iran doesn't practice terrorism is like saying Derek Jeter never played shortstop for the New York Yankees. It's a good way to get yourself into the New York Times and the New York Post, I would think.
Indeed, the Prime Minister, has spent much time in New York over the years and decades. He spent a whole lot of time in the United States as well, so he can understand and play to sort of that gallery and leverage his skill set with his knowledge of how, what is it that will resonate better amongst the public, whether be it, in New York locally or within the United States or even internationally.
Okay, well, New York is one stop. Washington's next. He'll be meeting with the U.S. President. Abbas did not get a similar invitation, it's worth noting. Netanyahu and Obama, though, have not had the best relationship, and Obama chided Israel in his speech. So what can we expect of this get-together, do you think?
I think it's going to be tense because the key thing that the Prime Minister spoke about today was Iran. I mean, clearly Israel is unhappy with the way the nuclear negotiations are going, and he is worried about a potential final agreement between the P5+1 group and the Islamic Republic of Iran. From the point of view of Israel, Iran would be able to use that as a justification to continue to advance its geopolitical footprint in the region, which is a threat for Israel. And the United States has a compulsion to see through that there is a successful nuclear negotiation. There's also quite a bit of overlap in interest between the United States and Iran with regards to IS in Syria and Iraq. And therefore, there is going to be that tension between the Prime Minister once he meets with President Obama.
Well, we'll definitely keep our eye on it. Kamran Bokhari, thanks so much for joining us from Toronto. Really appreciate it.